Oh man, that was great. Thank you, David, for that kind of tie-in to get us hot here. That's the Unflappable. David Markland, our director. Today we're going to be talking to Paul Terry, the author of the X Files, the official archives. First, I want to say a couple of things about the podcast that we do here at Dark Delicacies. One is that you can comment by typing it just like you would comment on a regular email, Facebook post, and just type it into the comments and send it, and we'll see it and we'll try to get to it while Paul and I are talking. We are, I think we're an X Files esque kind of video chat because we've had nothing but weird problems since we've started doing this. The very first podcast, we had big equipment problems and ended up doing it off of phones and feedback and all kinds of things. You can see that on our YouTube page, so check that out. That's kind of like whacked out. The next thing, we talked to Joe R. Lansdale a couple of weeks after that, and it was right in the middle of the hurricane in Texas where Joe was. It kept knocking us off the air, and he finally had to call in over the telephone, finish it, and then he was able to kick back in on the regular thing. And then last week, we tried to do this interview with Paul Terry, and for some reason, my microphone wasn't working. They didn't have any problem with the cameras, so I had to put clothes on, but the microphone wasn't working, so we cut it off, and we're back now. It seems like everything is working. Don't bump whatever your computer is setting on while you're watching this. It may send something over to us. I don't want that, okay? Our guest today is Paul Terry, and I am more than happy to bring him on at any point. I'm excited for this because, Paul, you're kind of a man of all different jobs and job descriptions. I mean, you're a composer, you're a producer, you're an author, you're a poster designer, you're an actor, but we don't want them to confuse you with the actor who played the kid in James and the Giant Peach.
Oh, Dale, I tell you, it's happened a bunch of times.
It's the same name, it's the English accent. We don't know anything over here. We're Americans.
It's all there. It's all there.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me on your show. This is terrific. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. And this X-Files book is quite a tome. Before I forget, I want to remind people that they can order signed copies of the book from Dark Delicacies, darkdel.com. From the website, go into the shopping cart, and Paul has been kind enough to oblige us with signing some copies so they can get those. When I open up this book, it's kind of overwhelming. And yet, it's nowhere near a reflection on all the episodes of the X-Files, right?
Absolutely. I think, actually, I love the fact that you felt it was overwhelming, because that's something that, when you're doing a project like this that's in-world, that's exactly what you want the reader to feel like when you're presenting them with really in-depth, super detailed case file history, case file details from all across the world of the X-Files. If you can't overwhelm them, then I think you're doing something wrong. You're skimming the surface, because all X-Files fans know that this world it's so rich, it's so detailed, that if you do this in the right way, that is exactly the emotional reaction I want from a fan, from an X-File. So thank you, Del, for for having that reaction.
Well, and the thing is, it's been so long since I've seen an X-Files show, and yet so many of those things stayed with me. I mean, we have a president right now who thinks he knows something about conspiracy theories. He's not even close. He's not even close. This book is filled with conspiracy theories. But how did you decide on the angle you were taking? Because my initial thought is, when I think X-Files, I think UFOs, aliens, and you stayed basically completely away from that. Your subtitle, as they can see on the screen right now, is Cryptids, Biological Anomalies, and Parapsychic Phenomena. It was like you did everything you could to avoid UFOs.
I'll be honest, that's exactly what I did, and that's intentional. This first book was conceived to basically be, terrestrial biological anomalies rather than anything extraterrestrial. So to rewind a little bit, the project really had to be about rewatching the entire series from front to back. And
which is how many episodes?
Oh my goodness, like 218, I think, episodes and 2 movies.
Whoa.
So it really had to be tracking every single episode. And I promised the fans out there, the fellow fans, I rewatched the whole thing. I took copious notes on every single episode. And what that did was, it really showed me with sort of color coding the breakdown. So you have, of course, the conspiracy, the syndicate, anything to do with the aliens and extraterrestrial activity in the show. And then you have these things called Monster of the Week episodes, which all the fans love. And even within the Monster of the Week episodes, you start to see patterns. You start to see the cryptids, the biological anomalies, and the parapsychic events, which became the subtitle. So I just felt like coming, as you say, out the gate with a book this overwhelming, this dense of information, that doing the sort of a lot of the classic Monster of the Week cases first was the right thing to do, because the alien conspiracy, the mythology, the syndicate, it's really overwhelming, and it's so vast and intricate that let's just say I did take a lot of notes about all of the aspects of the X-Files, but this first book really felt like that is the place to go.
Oh, sure. And you did, what, 50 episodes are included in this book? Is that about right?
Yeah, it's a few more, because there's some episodes which are two-parters, like the Tombs episode. There are basically 2 stories that the Tombs appears in, and the Pusher has a sequel as well. But it's approximately 50 cases, I think, is the best way to describe it.
Oh, okay.
Of course, there's double episodes for things like that. But it was uncanny that when I had those crazy Word documents and color charts, that seeing these biological anomalies, terrestrial anomalies specifically, and then you start to see what is within those, is that so many of the classic creatures that are on this show, it kind of just, it sort of speaks to you. It goes, well, that's where you should go. That's the path you should go down for this book.
Did any of the creatures make return appearances in later episodes?
Most of the Monster of the Week ones really are a standalone case file. There's often a reference, or there's often, I would say, there's a theme that might return, and I don't want to give too much away in the book, but there's a component to the book where an agent, special agent Layla Harrison, is sort of seeing that. She's seeing some of the connections between the creatures, which gives the book as an experience, as a fan, a very different experience.
As I was flipping through the book, looking at just the incredible amount of art that is in the book, let alone the whole setup with the archive charts and the FBI records and the coffee stains and everything else that we did to make it look that way. I noticed Lance Hendrickson's photograph in there, and this was I'm guessing, because it's been so long, wasn't this pre him doing the Frank Black show where he played? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's well spotted. So when his TV show Millennium finished, there was actually a crossover episode that came after it finished called Millennium, which was almost like the perfect thing to do for the X-Files, because yes, it crossed over Frank Black character into the world of the X-Files, share the same universe, but actually having the episode be about New Year's Eve on the eve of the new millennium, and we remember all the crazy, all the computers going to crash and shut down. Is it going to be Skynet? But to have this kind of far more terrifying kind of end of days prophecy that the Millennium Group were sort of very fascinated with and wanted to almost to push forward. There were zombies. It was this insane horror episode of the X-Files, but was so fantastic to have the Frank Black mythos come into that show. And when I was looking at all the options for the episodes to do in this book, it was a no-brainer. It's essentially zombies. That they're pretty much, I would say, biological anomalies of a terrestrial nature.
Sure.
One of my favorite episodes of the X-Files, but it was just felt very important for the mythos of the X-Files and of Millennium to not forget that, to not have Lance Henriksen's character and case file in this particular book.
Right. It was a great slipping in of another reference that sent people down a whole different trail, and away they go. Obviously, we all have our favorite X-File episodes, and in sticking to your theme, one of mine was that sewer sucker kind of animal. He had a name. I can't think of it.
The Fluke Man. The Fluke Man.
The Fluke Man. Yes, yeah. He was one of my favorites.
Oh yeah.
Now, there's some great pictures of him in there, and the fact that you use mostly kind of black and white or sepia tinted pictures kind of adds to the authenticity of the FBI files. But there's some great shots of him in here right there.
Yeah, that particular case file was really exciting because, you know, it's one of the older episodes, and I was concerned. It
was first season, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was really concerned that those first few seasons, the Fox archives being in all these big cardboard boxes, just like a Raiders Lost Ark warehouse, or indeed the end of the X-Files pilot where you see that big warehouse. Were they around? Had they been trashed? Had they been lost? And so finding anything like that, the stuff for Fluke Man was really special. Thinking, we do actually have paper products, paper props, acetates, photography for things like that episode. But just on that note, very quickly, the designers behind this book, I have to bring them in as quickly as possible. The head case design team, Paul Keppel and Alex Bruce, they went beyond the extra mile for this book, because it was a daunting task, I think, for everybody involved at Abrams Books, because the realism that we wanted to achieve was, you know, there could be no debate about it. It had to look exactly like these were artifacts that you could almost want to pick up off the page, from evidence back to
newspaper clippings.
Yeah, and that can be done. That can be done pretty successfully. I would say even with a lot less attention to detail. But what I loved about Paul and Alex and Headcase Design and the conversations we had with Abrams Books was that, you know, this show goes back to the early 90s. So we were discussing things like fonts. And I'm such a font nerd. I knew that is exactly the kind of team you need on this book. What did government documents look like in the 90s? What fonts were they using? What fonts were the most popular? And how does that change as the years go by? And for me, as someone who loves to make in-world products like this, that's the ultimate attention to detail, because you're really drilling down into all those different kind of things. What are the dot matrix prints out? What font would that use at that period of time? Through to the late 90s and early 2000s, where you'll see those fonts change in the book. So it might not be something that, you know, I've called it out, but if you didn't know that, you might get a feel that time's passing in the book. But it's stuff like that if you're a team on a book, on an in-world, in-universe book like this X-Files book, that's the most exciting stuff for me to dive into. And huge props to the X-Files team, you know, at Fox, when, you know, this book was pitched in 2015. Just after
I was going to say, the genesis of this book, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. It's there's so much strange kismet to it, because when season 10 was announced, I think it was maybe a week after season 10 was announced, this idea had been rattling around in my head, and I contacted Fox and pitched the book and said to my contact there, you know what book I really think X-Files fans would go crazy for? And he was like, what exactly what book? We've done so many books about the X-Files. I said, no, but the X-Files, the actual case files that Mulder and Scully did and filed and gave in to Skinner. And it one of those crazy moments that it's so simple, you say it out loud, and everyone just went, why haven't we done that? And it's just, sometimes those simple ideas are just floating around in the ether, and you need to grab them.
What was part of the problem with so much postponement in the book coming to a reality that, okay, now we're going to publish the book?
Well, it's a great question. You know this, Del, being an author, publishing's a funny game. You know, things can get pitched and sort of flirted with by the publishing houses, and I will say there was a couple of other places, a couple of other publishers which were expressing interest in the project, and that went on for a couple of years, and it really was the end of 2017 was when Abrams, thank goodness Abrams took on this project, because they were clearly absolutely the right home for this project. And
well, they do a lot of art book type things and coffee table type books. So was part of this decision between them and let's call it the dueling publishers who had bids in. Was part of it your decision to want to go with the quality of publishing that Abrams brings to it?
To be honest, it was more simple than that. It was, I guess, if the first publisher had committed to it, it would have gone down a very different path, and maybe it would have still been a fantastic book. If the second publisher had come on board and the first one went away and the second one fully committed, again, maybe the book would have happened and been similar. But it was just happenstance, I guess, that those two kind of said, yeah, we're interested, let's talk about it a little bit more, and it went away. So it's third time's the charm, right? You know, Abrams were the place that said, yes, we absolutely want to make this book. And end of 2017 was when I was officially contracted to the book. And then into 2018, a lot of 2018 into 2019 was basically making it and collaborating with the archives team at Fox, who were amazing. They did not let us, you know, no stone unturned, trying to find the absolute best material for this book. And as I said earlier, it wasn't easy, because these days you digitize so much when you're archiving, but in those days it was physical items, put in folders, put in boxes, and a lot of this stuff.
Did you get to go through those folders and those boxes at all?
Oh, Del, I would just say the huge fan in me, and I talk about it out now, and I can't quite get the words out, because it is such a surreal experience when you get a book like this greenlit. That's surreal in the first place. Then you find yourself wading through boxes and boxes of dusty boxes from warehouses full of artifacts from your favorite show, and it's your job. You know, you have to be an investigator. You have to dig out this stuff, because it wasn't filed all precisely. Stuff had been thrown in a lot of boxes from the 90s. That was such a joy to do that, but it couldn't have been done without the archives team. They were amazing.
What was your eureka discovery?
Oh, they're honestly, I mean, most of what you see in the book is from the archive. There is some amazing recreation stuff from references from high definition captures from the screen that maybe had been lost or didn't exist, or a lot of times if there's graphics on the screen, Paul and Alex had to really figure out how to capture that for the book. But the stuff that I found, I mean, yeah, you said you wouldn't, you make me flummoxed and you put me on the spot. Okay, there's a few. The Shapes episode, which is about a creature called a Manitou, a kind of spiritual creature, kind of a werewolf in the werewolf realm, if you like. And I remember in the episode there was this stuff about the dentistry, the X-ray of the dental records, and I just thought, you know, we're talking about a human transforming into a kind of, you know, lycanthrope, and we got to have that. And it was stuck. It was kind of stuck between all these papers, and I almost dismissed it through this box finding it. So finding that was a huge win. And actually, much later in the show, there's an episode which Rhys Darby guests on, and the character he plays, Guy Mann, who in his normal form is this kind of lizard creature, and Gillian Anderson.
In his normal form, he's a lizard creature.
Yeah, in his normal form.
Yeah.
before he becomes, you know, transformed into being a human, and he doesn't want to be a human. Gillian Anderson's daughter Piper actually illustrated the sort of sketch artist drawings you see on the show, and that was something. It was two things with that episode. That. And there are these two stoner characters who've appeared a few times in the show, and they're in the cold open of this episode, which is called Mulder and Scully Meet the Were-Monster. And you see it for a fraction of a second on the screen, and basically it's the two stoners giving an eyewitness account, and it's written. And I thought, if we find that, I think those have been written out completely, and it's not just, you know, a few sentences for the screen. And they had. And again, they were almost lost, you know, trapped within papers, but we found those. They're in the book. So as a fan of those characters, getting their full first account statements of this moment is hysterical. I urge fans who love that episode, get to that moment in the book and find their eyewitness statements. They are hysterical.
And then put it on and watch along with it while you're reading honestly, the dialogue.
One of the loveliest reactions from a lot of the fans on this first publishing week has been two things. Has been that they have been revisiting episodes in the book that they loved and reading along or pausing it and looking at the case files. And another thing which is really touching is when people say they've been moved, you know, emotionally moved, or they're choked up reading a really a really difficult part of a case file, especially stuff that happens to Dana Scully, because I put a lot of work and time and research and redrafting to try and capture their voices, to try and capture Mulder's voice, Scully's voice, and there's a bunch of characters which you really have to get the way they talk exactly right for the case files, and then imagine it in a formal sense, that this is not, a novella or anything. This is actually a case file being submitted to their boss. So multiple pressures, but again, you just rise to the challenge because it's your favorite show. You just you get on with it. But it's really lovely to hear that kind of reaction.
You have done several, or even put together several making of film books. This isn't the first entertainment property that you've dealt with. This is not exactly a making of type book. What did they have one for X-Files, and were you approached first to take that? To me, that would have been like the easy way out, because this is not it.
There's been a bunch over the years, actually, a bunch of great books put together that have assessed the episodes or look back over certain seasons. But no, this was my first ever pitch to Fox about the X-Files. There's been other properties that I've been involved with pitching. Me and Tara Bennett, we pitched the idea of doing the 30th anniversary for Big Trouble in Little China, for John Carpenter's classic film. So I think when you pitch an idea and it comes to fruition, that's really, really special. But this was my first, my first pitch about the X-Files, because I think, you think it's my favorite show of all time. That's terrifying to even go near it. But you just go, I really believe in this, and I am like a dog with a bone with ideas most of the time. When I think the fans would want this, they would want to be able to look through the case files, and touch wood, reaction so far seems to be that they're enjoying looking through the book.
Yeah, it's selling very well. If the sales at Dark Delicacies is any indication. This book is moving, and in fact, when we were trying to do follow-up and reorder, because we've had to reorder twice on this thing, they were talking to us on the publisher side about low quantity, or we don't know if we have that many, all of that kind of thing. So hopefully you go into a second printing, which would be not only nice, but kind of unusual for a book of this size.
I hope so, Dale. I mean, a few fans have also been asking online, and it's an obvious question, and you touched on it at the beginning, is that these aren't all the case files by Mulder and Scully, and so are there plans for more? And all I would say to that, I did a great interview with Elise Wax from comingsoon.net, and she asked this question, and I would just assure them that, well, it's two things. As you know, Dale, for being an author, books like this, especially official license books, it all depends on how well this first book does. Nothing's guaranteed. But if they want to know whether I've planned for more, which looks at the whole, the extraterrestrial conspiracy and all the other kind of case files about the occult and things that dig into that stuff, yes, it has all been planned, but it's a fingers crossed moment. So let's see how the fans' reaction keeps going.
Of course. Now, if you did a second book, you could do it all on UFO and aliens, and you would still have a ton of cases that don't involve those at all or the monsters, right?
I would just say that I 100% agree with you. Yes, correct.
Yeah. Did the book ultimately turn out and look like you had in your head when you started?
Honestly, the production values that Abrams put into this and Headcase Design put into this, when I first saw it, as you know, it was actually in Dark Delicacies. The first time I held a copy was the first signing session, and it blew me away. I mean, seeing it as a PDF was already incredibly impressive. During the design process, you're throwing PDFs back and forth to each other with the editing process. And I had a sense of the size of it, but actually seeing it in person, the weight of it, and the scale of it, and the quality of the paper stock they chose was perfect. The really thick card, which is the wraparound, which is the covers, and the kind of almost like a cloth spine effect with the spot metallic. It's just things like that, and you just go, man, this has turned out to be even more incredible than I hoped. But from day one when I pitched the concept, the way it looks was a hope, but I didn't know whether it would ever get near that, because you just don't know. You don't know what compromises have to happen. Making a book like this and making it as realistic as this is as a long and expensive process as you can imagine. This is not a quick design job, and they just did an incredible job at Headcase. And it's what I loved about working with them was, so let's say we're looking at a case and, the ideas are bouncing back and forth. And one of my jobs as doing the big rewatch was to be as helpful as possible. So I'm not expecting designers to rewatch, 200 plus hours of TV and movies. So I was looking at things like, for example, the Tombs case, which is the first human mutant case in the book. Looking at the episode and going, okay, this transcript has to be printed out on this kind of paper with this kind of font for these reasons. Or, for example, there's a moment in the Eve case file with the two girls, the twins, where I really wanted the security camera to have all this interference, as though, they have very strange powers, the Eve project, if you like, and I wanted to have this effect that even security cameras cannot really capture a good image of these girls for very strange supernatural quasi reasons. So it's things like that I was being as helpful as possible with a kind of an art direction cap on. However, you have to, when you're collaborating with people who clearly have a ton of talent, you've got to leave that room open for collaboration, for them to flex their wings and go, hey, we thought about doing this. So it became this really great back and forth, and some ideas they came up with to really flesh out some of the cases, or saying, Paul, would this work? We want to do this kind of thing. Does that work in an in-world space of this episode? And sometimes it wouldn't, and sometimes it would. And it would just be that great conversation to make sure that if a fan is studying this case file, legitimately everything you see in the case file could have been in the case file submitted to Skinner. Because that was really important to me. I didn't want to cheat anything. I did a great chat with Rhys Darby on his podcast,
Sure.
The Cryptids Factor, and he was making a joke about saying, there's no picture of me, there's no picture of the Darkmeister, there's no picture of Guy Mann in his human form. And with this great chat about it, and I sort of apologized and said, well, yeah, but being the in-world, fastidious in-world author that I want to be, there's no reason why that photo of him, specifically his human form, would be in the book.
Right.
He wasn't photographed, he wasn't taken to the police station, he wasn't catalogued or processed or anything. And that's why you only see the Guy Man in the lizard form in the sketches in the book. But it's things like that. I want the fans to know that when they read through a case file, things they might go, oh, why is that a certain way? And it could even be down to something from a newspaper, that there may be, a slight typographical error. But I would say that to be the most authentic to this kind of book, oftentimes when you're creating a world within a book and you're looking at things like some of the props, we had alternate versions of some of the props, as though other newspapers may have covered certain things. You really want to make sure that you're being authentic to that prop, and sometimes there would be something like that in it. And when you're printing that in a book, it adds so much more authenticity to the real world, because as we know, you pick up newspapers and stuff and they do have those glitches. So when it's all perfection, it doesn't quite ring true to be real. So that's a really important thing with a book like this.
Sure, it's like doing a film that takes place in the 1930s, and every car on the street looks like a brand new car from the 1930s. That's instead of them being beat up and like they've been driven and everything else. Well, this has been fascinating. I really am happy that you were on. I want to tell people again that if they want to get a signed copy of your book, they can go to darkdell.com and go into the shopping cart. They can order it, and when we run out, we'll try to bring in more and have you back. You're in Southern California, which is the same area we're in, and we'll try to connect so that you can come in and sign more books should we need it, and I hope we do. But thank you. This is a work of art. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Del, so much. And to your point, I will 100% do that. However much people want to order from Dark Delicacies, I will make the time. I will come in. I will keep signing those batches. Happy to do that, because I love your store. I love this show. It's great to have bookstores like yours. Well, you're more than a bookstore. You cover everything horror, and it's really fantastic. So thank you for having me on.
And we're looking forward to Volume 2.
Me too. I'm going to quote the show. Maybe there's hope.
Well, something's out there. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, the truth is in here. The truth is in the book. So
That's right. And people will spend days with this book once they get into it. It's not like you sit down, read it through. Wasn't that nice? Put it on your bookshelf.
I hope so. I really hope that it becomes something that is an experience. The narrative that I wanted to have, where Special Agent Layla Harrison is tasked with looking after and preserving the truth in the face of this digital age that we live in, where things are being digitized and perhaps manipulated for a cause. I wanted to have that nice honoring of analog as well, honoring the original versions of these case files, to really try and preserve the truth of of Mulder and Scully, especially, that she really looked up to.
Great. It's called The X-Files, The Official Archives, Cryptids, Biological Anomalies, and Parapsychic Phenomena. Quite a title, mouthful. Thank you for being on, and if you want other people that should have seen this, and they didn't catch it live, it'll be up on our YouTube page in 24 to 48 hours, I believe. You can catch it there, and I will repost things on our Facebook page so people can find that link. Thank you, Paul Terry, very much.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you so much.